This is episode number 11 with Julia Koerner. Welcome to the Archiologist Talks. The Archiologist is a collaborative platform that focuses on showcasing worldwide design projects from students and young professionals. This time around, though, we're creating a space to talk about design with the leading architects and designers around the world. Our goal for these conversations is to inspire and influence the young community. We're going to bring in tips, personal insights, and different perspectives of what design really is to each one of us. And I'm your host, Maria Flores. Hey guys, so welcome back to another episode of the Archiologist Talks. Today, I know I always say this. I always say, guys, today we have an amazing interviewee. It's gonna be great. But seriously, this time, it's amazing. With us today, we have Julia Koerner, who is a Austrian designer who received her master's degree from the University of Applied Arts in Vienna and then from the Architectural Association in London from the AA. And she basically works at the convergence of architecture, product design, and fashion design. And she's internationally recognized for design innovation in 3D printing. Guys, listen to this. Her designs have been featured in the National Geographic Magazine, in Vice, Wired, and the New York Times. She is also the founder of JK Design, specialising in digital design for 3D printing. Some of her most famous collaborations include Haute Couture Houses for Paris Fashion Week and costumes for Hollywood entertainment productions such as Marvel's Black Panther. You probably saw it. I probably saw it. We all saw it. We all know. Which, by the way, she got an Oscar for Best Costume Design. In this episode, we talk about what inspires her to create the beautiful designs and where she got her first inspiration to become a designer. We also talk about her years in school and her experience working in many different countries, as well as meeting some of her mentors. She goes deep into her creative process and what software she currently uses. We also talk about how she gets the amazing collaborations that she has and how she landed the Marvel collaboration to design a costume for Black Panther. We then talk about her opinion on the future of technology and architecture. And finally, we talk about why she loves being a professor at UCLA. She also gives some great insight, guys, into the not so pretty side of collaborations, and she talks about some of her struggles, which I found to be very humbling, in my opinion. It was great to see the not so pretty side of, being a successful designer in the profession. So I think this episode, and I know I say it all the time, but this one is an episode you definitely do not want to miss because she's very fun. From talking to her for about an hour, I got the impression that she loves to share what inspires her, and she wants other people to feel motivated around her. And I think it's going to be a great interview to listen to. So let the talk begin. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Maria. How are you?
Good, and you? It's so nice to meet you.
Yes, very nice to meet you finally.
You've been traveling a lot lately, right? Where have you been?
I've traveled a lot, yes. I've been to Austria recently and here
You are from Austria.
I am from Austria, yes. I kind of split my time between Los Angeles and Austria. And have been traveling a lot in the summer, and now back to LA. UCLA just started last week, so yes.
That's great. That's great. So tell me a little bit about you. What do you do? What's your research focused on?
So I'm a designer. I have a background in architecture. I work very interdisciplinary across different scales. I focused on architectural installations, product design, fashion design, and I'm also teaching at UCLA. I'm on the faculty university since 2012. And so I kind of do both research, practice, and teaching.
That's great. How do you like teaching?
I like teaching a lot because it kind of gives an exchange between the students and kind of the professor, where you can kind of really understand what the students' interests are, and you can kind of it's very refreshing to have this exchange next to practice and research, because always takes you a little bit outside of your own bubble, and and listen to young upcoming creative people who have lots of great ideas, and to kind of engage with them. And that's very different from a lot of business related topics you have to engage throughout the day. So I find it very refreshing, and it keeps me in the loop of like what kind of new innovative ideas are out there, and what kind of new technologies students want to explore. And so I find it not only that I give to them, but I get a lot from the students as well. So I really love this kind of exchange.
That's so true. That's so true. I want to get back to that. But first, tell me how your interest in architecture started. Why did you study architecture?
So my interest in architecture started really early, I would say, because it comes also from my family a little bit. Like my grandfather, he was an engineer, and my father was a professor in arts and crafts. And so they always kind of showed me the world of buildings and craftsmanship and technologies. And my father and my mother, they would take me around Europe and show me buildings and make me aware of how exciting it is to travel and to see a lot of the architecture. So I remember early visits to France or Greece, and we would go and see buildings from Le Corbusier or ancient temples in Greece, and I would be always very fascinated by those environments and kind of structures. And I then grow that interest even more, and I think I always wanted to do something which had to do with the creative field. I had a phase where I was also really interested in fashion design, because from my other grandmother's side, she was actually a seamstress, and I had always a kind of eye. I would spend with her time in like looking through fashion magazines and like kind of get exposure to that side of discipline. And then from my mother's side, it was the kind of nature and biology. So because she is a biologist teacher, so she opened this world of like looking at natural phenomenons and the biodiversity we have on this planet, and looking at different species of flowers and animals and kind of geological environments. And so it was kind of this fusion of nature, the arts, and fashion, which kind of inspired me throughout growing up as a child. And when it came to the point to make a decision what to study, first wanted to study fashion design. I was really pretty determined. I went to Vienna. I applied for the University of Applied Arts to the Raf Simons class for fashion design. But they didn't take me. So I was really kind of surprised, and I was like, okay. The same day I decided my second passion was always architecture. So I went to study architecture, and I know today that if I wouldn't have gone that path and actually studied architecture and got myself familiarized with three-dimensional understanding of spaces and learning all the different technologies, I would not be at this point where I am today, working in kind of interdisciplinary way between fashion design, architecture, and product design. So it was a very interesting route I took. And during my entire studies of architecture, I would never think I would return to the discipline of fashion again.
Yeah, you never regretted it.
No, so I was fascinated by architecture, as I always was, and I took it also as like a sign. I was like, okay, I'm more into architecture. That's the path I should take, and so I took it as a positive thing.
Yeah.
And so I started at the University of Technology, which is a public university in Austria. I started with 500 other students, and that was a pretty big class where you got exposed to like a lot of different fields, like urban design and spatial design and structures and like all the different things what architecture has to offer. But then there was this one moment where I went to Switzerland and saw an exhibition in Basel, and it was the embryological house of Greg Lynn, which kind of triggered my interest. And I knew he was teaching at the University of Applied Arts. I had a few friends who already had transferred from the University of Technology to the Angewandte, and so I decided I also want to take that path, and then I studied with Greg Lynn for 4 years at the University of Applied Arts, and that was a very interesting experience, because during that time it was Zaha Hadid teaching there and Wolf Briggs teaching there, and Greg, and I was in Greg's studio, and that was amazing because they brought along all these people for juries, like they brought in Tom Main.
So they were kind of your influences when you were in architecture school, right?
Yes. They were really
That's so cool.
Big personas. Their architecture was the architecture to look at, and they were my mentors in a sense. And so yeah, that's one part. And then later on, I returned to do another master at the Architectural Association in London, where I did a Master of Science in Emergent Technologies and Design, which was kind of a different angle to architecture because it had to do a lot with biomimetics and bio-inspired engineering and a lot of digital tools and software involved. And so I thought I kind of grabbed two different angles of architecture discipline in a way from both universities. And
what made you go into that specific track, the one with digital tools and software, emerging technologies?
So when I was at the University of Applied Arts, it was around 2005 that the university got the first 3D printer. And so it was really like Greg Lynn who brought the technology to the university. And when we got this 3D printer, it was one of the first ones. It was a powder print. No one really knew how to use it. And I thought that was the most interesting thing about it, that no one knew how to use it. So it was something to explore what other people hadn't done before. And so it gave me the kind of avant-garde approach to like, okay, there's this new machine, what can we do with it? How can we tweak it? How can we like explore it to do something different from my peers? I thought it gave me a tool to stand out. And so I explored it a lot, and it gave me the opportunity to learn something very special at that point of time. And similarly, in the AA, the Emergent Technologies and Design was also focused on how can we integrate these techniques in the method or in the methodology of research. So how can the 3D printer or the CNC mill or the laser cutter not only be a tool to craft a physical scale model which represents your ideas, what you had previously done in the computer, but also how to use it to as part of the development of a series of physical models where you then would study the performance of the digital tool on it. So for example, how can you produce laser cut models where you then later on evaluate how the material bends because you laser cut it in a certain way. And then you would analyze all these different bending techniques or the different kind of curvatures. And that would...
Wow, that's so interesting. But so
Yeah,
much work, right?
yeah, it was in both universities, it was a lot of work always. It was
Yeah.
very intense.
And
It was
then,
very intense because you are kind of engaged in an environment where you have a desk at the school, you work in a dedicated studio, and you spend more than a day there. You go only home for sleep, and you work there all the time. You have all the different labs available to you. You want to make use of that time. So, and the people, it's all about the people. Like, I met so many friends from different nationalities in these schools, and I'm still friends with most of them today. It kind of, this is the kind of network you build up during your studies, which then helps you in the future to stay connected and expand your knowledge even after university.
and then I imagine that it was also very interesting because these technologies were very fresh. You know, now we see it everywhere, but back then, well, I mean, it's not like it has been a very long time, but in 2005,
Yeah.
I feel like they were very new, right? All
Mm-hmm.
these new tools. So that's really cool that you got to have hands-on experience with that.
Yeah, and alongside those kind of digital fabrication tools, they developed also the digital software platforms. So I think Maya was a little bit earlier, a few years earlier that it started, but then also Rhino started around this time, and then later
Great.
on Grasshopper came. And so when I was in school, at the beginning there was no Grasshopper yet. And before Maya, we all would use Form Z actually to work in our digital design tools. But no one today uses that software anymore, who I know. So some things stay, some things get really implemented into the kind of standard work tools of the architects. Others disappear again, I would say.
Nice. So, what did you do after you graduated? Where did you go? Did you know where you wanted to go next?
Um, I always knew the near future. I didn't know the far future in essence. Like, it was never for me that I was like, okay, I had this idol of an architect who
And I want to be like them. Yeah.
yeah, like I never had that particular vision for my future. What I did have, I did know what I was interested in at that particular moment of time. And so because we were exposed to very international juries, I kind of started to work for a couple of people already while I was a student. I would go out for internships and start during my summers to go and travel to other cities like New York or London and do international internships, which was like, it was very fresh and new because some people, they decide to stay in a comfort zone. A lot of my friends, they went to work for offices in Vienna or in Austria. And I really wanted to expand my knowledge of the English language. I wanted to travel to different cities. I wanted to make new friends. And so I traveled to those cities, to New York and London, and I worked with offices like Mark Foster Gage office in New York, and then I worked with Ross Lovegrove in London, who is a very well-known industrial designer. And from these kind of summer internships, it started to become more, and so I started to work with Ross really intensely, even while I was a student. And it was kind of clear to me that after graduation, that would be the place where I would go, because I fell in love with the city of London, and that's the place I wanted to be at. And while everyone else kind of went to go and work for Zaha Hadid. I wanted to do something different, and so I had this opportunity to go and work with Ross. And I had many friends at different architecture firms there. Some friends from Foster, Zaha Hadid, Grimshaw Architects. There was Acme Architects back then, and Foreign Office of Architects, and there was Amanda Livette. And so it was this kind of, there were many international firms, and I had friends working in all of these companies. So there was a lot of exchange. When we would like go out and meet, we would like get to know what everyone is working on. And so it was a very vibrant and inspiring time, I would say.
So one of your advice would be for, students to kind of go out there and not stay in their comfort zone, right? Because I feel like many people do that.
I think
that's interesting.
I think it depends. You must be the type of person, and it must be your character that you want to do. I think it's definitely worth, and that's what I tell my students, you have to go away in order to know the reasons for why you want to come back or why you want to be in the place where you are. If you never try to even for once, go outside, I think you might limit yourself or your opportunities to have a different picture of the world and what it's like. It challenges you because you kind of have to go out of your comfort zone. You have to experience a different place. You have to find your way. But a lot of people then they go and they work for 2 or 3 years in another country, and then they come back because they figure out that's really what they want.
Yeah.
And others, like me, they keep on going and go from London to Los Angeles, and at some point they kind of stay at one place, which they fall in love with, and kind of think is the right place for them.
Yeah, but that's great because you start making connections outside of where you're from. So that's always good.
Yeah.
That's a good piece of advice. Can you go through your creative process? Like, how do you begin a project and everything you do in between in order to finish that project?
So my creative process is slightly different on every kind of project I work with, because it's most of the time involves a new idea. But I would say in generalized terms, it starts with looking at natural phenomena and natural environment.
Okay.
I'm inspired by nature and how it grows systems in nature, and how what kind of materials are used in nature, and how things have the underlying mathematical logic in natural patterns, for example. And then I extract that information, may it be through 3D scanning or through looking up the algorithms of how such structures are made up. And then I would extract that information, and then I would start taking it in the next level and designing morphologies of those and designing iterations. And dependent on whether it is on the smallest scale of architecture, which is the second skin around our body, in terms of like the things we surround ourselves when we wear something, or if it's on a slightly larger scale, then dependent on the scale, I would then adapt those iterations and morphologies to inherit a certain function as well. So if it becomes the design for a dress or for a costume, I would take on the measurements of the human body, and I would kind of start designing around the human body as the body being my site. And if it's more of like a larger scale design, I would take the site parameters, the environment, the kind of situation whether it's in the city or out in the landscape. And I
Mm-hmm.
would take those measurements to work with and adapt my morphologies to the specific location I would work on. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that after all of that comes a third part. I would say that third part essentially derives simultaneously along this entire process, is that I look at the materiality of what I work with. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have a site which is the human body, then I would look at printing and what type of material I'm going to work with. And if it's a flexible material, I would design for that specific material, because each technology and each material has its specific requirements of design. And if
Right.
it's for a larger structure, I would never say that my material choice comes at the end after the design process. It comes actually in some way in the middle, or even sometimes in the beginning, that I say, okay, I have a very interesting material, sheet
Mm-hmm.
material. Now, how do I work with that, and how do I best design with that, that I can
Right.
achieve a very intelligent design? And I think that's something is really important for me, that the where the inspiration comes from, the location or the surrounding for what it's designed, and the material it's made of, are having a synergy to each other.
Right. So you're always having the material in mind and working and creating the piece
Mm-hmm.
along with the material. That's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I think only then you can come up with very intelligent design.
Oh
Because
yeah, of
you
course.
already know what is the material. It's not that the material is like an after effect. It's like it is the way how it's designed. It is because that's the most logical way of how to work with that material.
Yeah, I think a lot of students in school, and I kind of put myself in that position too because I used to be one of them. It was just like you're building something, you have like a whole semester building something, and at the end they ask you, so what is the material? And you're just like, you just go for concrete. You're like, well, that's concrete, because you don't actually give thought to
Yeah.
what material it could be. So you design for that material. You just design in general without really thinking what a material could be. So
Yeah.
yeah,
If we do have
it's really
projects like
interesting.
this with our students, where it's
Mhm.
more about the representation or figuring out tools in the design process, then we most of the time tell the students, don't just come up with a last minute material decision. Just say that's not part of what the research was about. In this
Right.
particular design studio, I was focused on something very specific, different from the material. And
Mhm.
I think that's much more thoughtful than just applying a material texture on something which does make no sense, because it was never part of
Yeah.
what you looked into.
Mhm. What software are you currently working with? Like name three, I guess.
I work a lot with Rhino, Grasshopper, and Autodesk Maya. I do work a lot in Rhino and Grasshopper because it's a visual programming technique, so it
Mhm.
allows for making your processes much faster, because when you do write scripts, you can automate certain processes. And
Right.
I sometimes use also Python scripting, which also runs
Mhm.
on Rhino and Grasshopper. And then Maya I use a lot for analog modeling techniques, and kind of for very creative process of intuitive design.
Yeah. So right now you have your own practice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When did you think it was time to start your own practice? Like, why did you start it?
So after I worked a lot with Ross Lovegrove, I
Mm-hmm.
went back to London to do a master in the AA, and then right after AA, I came to LA and started teaching at UCLA in 2012. And around that same time, already while I was at AA, I started a lot of collaborations with other designers and artists. So I did, for example, collaborations with Iris van Herpen or Marina Hermanseder. They are all in the fashion industry. And I was very interested in how I, as an architect, can actually bring something of my knowledge to a different discipline. And I was always interested in the human body. Already my thesis was looking at the superhuman enticement and how you can work with the human body. And so that was always my thing, in a sense. And so out of these collaborations grew also more like projects which were on a larger scale. And at one point I got this project with one of the most famous, well-known Haute Couture houses in Paris.
Okay.
Where I just thought this was a very, very big project which entailed a lot of things which I had to take care of. And so that was for me the point, okay, I have to make a company. And my choice was to form the company in Austria because a lot of these clients, they were all over Europe. And so that's when I founded the company JK Design GmbH in Salzburg, Austria, which is my hometown. And
so that's why you traveled to Austria.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah, and it made no sense to kind of start that in the United States. It made more sense to do it in Europe, and I had the resources there. A lot of the 3D printing companies I work with are actually in Europe, in Belgium. And so it was like kind of the right choice to do. And only in recent years I get more kind of projects also in the United States, and it's kind of interesting to be between the two environments and continents.
So you know how we're always talking about the positive things and stuff like that, but did you at any point have any challenges or disappointments that happened to you?
Oh yes, big ones. Everyone has, and we rarely talk about it.
Yeah, it's not all pretty.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest disappointments was that me and the few colleagues of mine, we were like kind of on the verge of like starting some of these collaborations. And I think that collaboration is always kind of hyped to be like really good. You know, you should go out and you should work with other people. And I think it's very important like to say that there can be really great collaborations and there can be not so great collaborations. I think that it really depends who you work with, and you have to be ready to also face your challenges. And so I would say that I had a few experiences where I did collaborate with really great designers, and the collaborations by themselves were really amazing. But at a later on point, because things weren't set out in contracts or like very specific at the beginning, you know, people change, and people then, I had a few instances of collaborators which then did not credit me anymore in my participation in the work. They sold pieces to museums and did not let me know about it.
No
and so,
way.
You know, there
crazy.
is, yes, and I think that when you're young and when you're really excited about your opportunities to collaborate, then it's very important that you kind of know what your rights are and you know what you're engaging with. It's very different from when you work for an office. If it's like work for hire and you like do your internship or you go and work for somebody and it's very clear you are working for that person, that's not a collaboration. A collaboration is really if you collaborate with another architect or with a fashion designer or with an artist. I think that, and you're kind of going into the project on equal terms, then you just want to make sure that you also gain equal equal rights on the project, equal kind of ownership, and so that's, I think, something important which you don't learn in school. Like everyone who I talk to who has done collaborations has learned it the hard way.
Oh, so, yeah, not many people talk about it either, you know?
Yeah. No,
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I can tell great stories, maybe another time.
Yeah, no, but thank you for telling that, because it's important for people, you know, to be aware that sometimes people can take advantage of you, you know, like yes. with the work that you do.
Yes, and especially we architects, is my experience, we like what we do a lot. So we get exploited for our excitement, and we get exploited both on our time. A lot of architecture firms have really long hours. A lot of internships are not being paid, and I'm really against this. I think it's not fair, and it's not only there. Like even if you're like a kind of if you have made your name, if you're known, you know, then even then there are like these people who come up and like want you to do things for free, or like just think because it's exciting that you can show your work or that your work is being exhibited or so, that it's logical that you wouldn't get any money for that. I mean, which other profession does have that?
Yeah.
It's I think time to change.
It is very sad. It's very sad, yeah. Let's talk about a good collaboration of yours, which was with Marvel for Black Panther.
Yes.
How was that? Like, how I don't know. I'm lost with words. Like it's incredible. How did that occur?
That one was really great because it was my first movie I was working on. And so the best part was that I didn't know what I was working on when I was working on it, because they gave me a call and they said it's a costume institute in Hollywood, and I knew the costume designer Ruthie Carter, and I knew that the movie had to do with Africa and technology. And at the beginning, it was unclear to me, why would they want to work with 3D printing? Why would they want to have something very highly technological for this regal attire of the main character? And I just thought, oh, that sounds like a really interesting project. And we started working on it. I researched a lot of the traditional Zulu patterns. And only in the kind of process of working on the project, I gain more and more, you know, insights. It's always when you're doing like a project for the first time, and this was my first costume design for a film, you're very sensitive, or you go into the project with a very, you know, like you want to see, you want to test, you don't want to go full in and like ask all these questions. You just want to like do it how they maybe play it a little bit, because you never know. Maybe the movie turns out like a really great thing, or maybe it becomes really like, you don't know, you don't want to show it anywhere. So yeah, that was the kind of situation. And then I learned throughout the process that the actress was cast, Angela Bassett, and so I had to like adapt all the digital files to kind of fit to her measurements, which was great that I was using generative design methods, because I could just fit in the kind of diameters and radii of her head and her shoulders, and my geometries would kind of adapt to it visually. And so there the digital tools came in really handy in comparison to traditional methods of costume design, where you wouldn't design the costume digitally first. You would just start making mock-ups and molds and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. And then, then I think when they started filming, I kind of had the first time they told me what movie it was for and what company it was for, because they had code words for everything. Like, it was all top
What? Really?
secret. Yeah,
So
like,
you knew about it like towards the end.
yeah. And then I still
Wow.
didn't really know what that meant, because I wasn't a Marvel fan back then. I was not
Mhm.
yet knowing what Black Panther.
Yeah.
And so I think it really hit me when 2 months before the movie started in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
it had the pre-sale was all sold out.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I do? So
Wow.
I was really like, I was really excited, and I was really curious, because I also didn't know how the costumes end up being seen on the screen, because I wasn't involved in the after production and the filming. So I literally saw it the first time when I went with Ruth Carter to the movies, and saw the movie like everyone else on the screen.
That's so
So
funny.
yeah, it was. And then, everything kind of took its role, and then the movie got really famous and won a lot of awards, and then the Oscar this year for the best costume design. And so
Wow.
it was really exciting to follow that experience and share it with the team. And there are so many people involved in the whole movie and in the costumes. It was just really exciting to meet some of the people and work together with them. And so that was the best part.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seriously, that's incredible. Incredible.
And it was
So,
great also because, it got so much visibility. A lot of the
mm-hmm.
work I have done prior to that, like for Haute Couture, very limited people are allowed to go and see these Haute Couture shows. And so it was always very, kind of inclusive in a way.
Yeah.
And and in the movie, everyone can go to the cinema and see the movie. So that was a really great part. And a lot of people who maybe are not interested in architecture, or
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily, knew what I was really doing, they all in a sudden saw some of my work. And that was really nice.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the movie opened a lot of people's eyes
Yes.
regarding fashion and
Yeah.
3D printing.
Yeah.
So that's great. How do you think they found out about you? Like the Marvel team.
So they were really interested in the 3D printing designs, and they saw my designs I had done for Paris Haute Couture. And
Wow.
I personally knew one of the illustrators, Philip Bouty, in the costume design team. And so he was, when he heard them talking about 3D printing and my designs, he was like, hey, I know Julia. And so that's how the connection came up.
Wow, that's great. So it's always good to have connections internationally.
Yes, it's good to be at the right time and the right place, and there are
Yeah.
so many factors which have to work out. You have
Mm-hmm.
the right time at the right place, and then everything else has to fall in place. There's a lot of hard work in it, but you need also sometimes a little bit of luck. So I
Yeah.
think it's a combination.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the last few questions. Where do you think the future of architecture is going? Is it really going towards technology?
For the future of architecture, I think. I don't think it's so singular. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that the future of architecture is involving necessarily technology. I think I like to look at the things more multifaceted, and I think that we
Mm-hmm.
need a lot of diversity of people to make it a very great and creative field. So I don't think that everyone needs to now move into technology. I think that we need those people who um, look more at material performances. I think we need to look at people who Look at urban house, like urban development, urban design, at housing problems, at the theory, at the history, at all the different facets which are so important to make the diversity of architecture evolve. And I think that we need, I think we really need that diversity in our field to make it continue to be so inspirational and powerful as it is.
Yeah, that's so true. I agree with you. Okay, last question. What is one piece of advice that you would like to give a current student or recent graduate? I know that we kind of went a little bit on pieces of advice and stuff like that, but just your personal opinion.
My personal opinion is that you're very obviously have the ground, the core values of what you as a person are made up. So maybe you you have to know what you're interested in. Or if you don't know what you're interested in, at least have a little bit of a goal where you want to go. And you need to be really hardworking. You need to be really dedicated. You need to be reliable, because with everyone who you work with, those are the core values, I think. You need to be reliable. You need to be dedicated. You need to submit, and you be able to submit on dates when there are deliveries. And if you kind of follow those core values, I think you're already in the game really far. But then on the other side, what I also think is really important is connections. You need to keep really good connections with your professors, with people who you're work along the way, with your colleagues. Be really respectful to each other, because essentially the more outgoing you are and the more connections you gain, the more opportunities you will have in the future. I think that is really important, and you will be in touch with those people later on in your life. You never know, but I gained so much from the mentors we talked earlier in this interview about, Reglin or Ross Lovegrove or Mark Gage, people I worked with. Even if it wasn't for a long time, there's some people who support you for a lifetime, and they are really important, because they're your network. They eventually become your colleagues, and you're going to work with them in the future. You're going to meet them on different locations. So I think I'm really grateful I had those people in my life, and I'm grateful for the friends I met along, friends from the AA. My partner, he's an architect as well. I work really closely with him, Kai Salra. And I think these people are really important, because they make you, they are your network, they are your environment.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day, because just like how you're saying, architecture is actually one of the few careers out there that you grow a connection with your professor and with your mentor, you know? I feel like in no other career do you have such friendship that you can have with a professor. You know, student professor connection is it's incredible in architecture. So it's interesting what you're saying.
Yeah, I also I would say I see a lot of my students more as my colleagues, because they're gonna be my students for 1 or 2 courses over a period of 2 to 3 years. But after that, they're they become colleagues. So I think it's good that I even now start making connections with students, and I stay in touch with them, see where they are going, and I think that's really, really great. And maybe, I don't know if it's the only profession, as you say, but it's definitely a unique thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. This was such an interesting conversation, really. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it also a lot. Thanks for
Thank you so much.
reaching out, and I hope I was able to inspire some of your listeners, and looking forward to stay in touch with you as well, and see the interview published, and speak soon.
Yeah, me too. I wish you all the luck and success for you in all future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much. See you.
See you.
Well, hello there. Thank you so much for reaching the end of this episode. I hope that you feel inspired to create something great, to go out there and look for innovative ways to use 3D printing, laser cutting, CNCing, whatever you think that it's going to get you to the top of the line. Just do it. Seriously, just do it. I want for these interviews to give you a sense of motivation, to make you feel inspired, and hopefully Julia Koerner was a good person and a good motivator to get you going. See you guys next week. Have a beautiful rest of your day.